This is a map of Russia. What you can see stretching before you is the largest country on Earth, a vast wilderness spanning 11 time zones and containing some of our planet's most remote and inhospitable regions. From the frozen tundra of Siberia to the depths of Lake Baikal, Russia holds secrets that have puzzled scientists, historians, and explorers for generations. Many of these mysteries remain unsolved, hidden in plain sight across this enormous nation's diverse landscapes.
What we found here is a partial skeleton of a woolly mammoth. It was an adult male, probably in its 40s at the time of its death, probably lived between 10,000 and 15,000 years ago.
In the coming journey, we'll venture into places few have dared to explore, unraveling 15 of Russia's most perplexing enigmas. These aren't just tales of the unexplained, they're windows into Russia's complex history, cutting-edge science, and the unyielding human spirit that has always defined this remarkable land.
The walls of this huge crater are completely made of ice.
Our first mystery takes us to the remote reaches of Siberia, where the Earth itself seems to be opening up in spectacular and alarming ways. The Batagayka crater, often called the gateway to the underworld by locals, is a massive and ever-expanding gash in the Siberian landscape. First noticed in the 1960s, this thermokarstic depression now stretches more than a kilometer long and 100 meters deep, growing larger with each passing year. Unlike impact craters formed by meteorites, the Batagayka crater represents something potentially more ominous, the literal melting of Siberia. For thousands of years, the permafrost in this region has remained frozen, locking away ancient organic material, prehistoric remains, and vast stores of methane gas. But as global temperatures rise, this permanently frozen ground has begun to thaw, causing the land to collapse inward in a process scientists call thermokarst. What makes Batagayka truly remarkable isn't just its size, but what it's revealing. As the crater walls continue to erode, they expose layer upon layer of Earth's history, like pages in an ancient book being revealed for the first time in 200,000 years. Scientists have discovered perfectly preserved remains of ancient forests, Ice Age animals, and pollen samples that provide unprecedented insight into Earth's climate history. But Batagayka isn't alone. Since 2014, dozens of mysterious craters have been appearing across the Siberian landscape, particularly on the Yamal Peninsula. These craters, some measuring up to 50 meters wide, appear suddenly and violently. The leading theory suggests they form when pockets of methane gas released by thawing permafrost build up enormous pressure underground before exploding to the surface. Local reindeer herders have reported hearing thunderous booms and seeing flashes of light before these craters appear. The Dyatlov Pass incident. But long before climate change began revealing Siberia's secrets, another mystery was unfolding in these snow-covered mountains of the northern Urals. In February 1959, 9 experienced hikers led by Igor Dyatlov embarked on what should have been a challenging but manageable expedition through the Ural Mountains. All 9 were young athletic students or graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute, skilled outdoors people who knew how to handle themselves in harsh winter conditions. What happened next has become one of the most enduring mysteries in Russian history, spawning countless theories ranging from the plausible to the supernatural. On the night of February 1st, something caused these 9 hikers to slash their way out of their tent from the inside and flee into the sub-zero mountain night, most of them wearing only underwear or light clothing despite temperatures of 30 to 102 degrees. Search parties later found their bodies scattered across the slope. 2 were found near the remains of a small fire, their hands and feet badly burned in what appeared to be desperate attempts to stay warm. 3 were discovered in poses suggesting they were attempting to return to the camp. The remaining 4 weren't found until spring in a ravine under 4 meters of snow with catastrophic internal injuries but almost no external trauma. The official Soviet investigation concluded that the hikers died from a compelling natural force, but this vague explanation has satisfied no one. The peculiar circumstances have fueled decades of speculation. Why did they cut their way out of the tent when they could have used the entrance? Why did none of them properly dress before fleeing? What could possibly have terrified these experienced mountaineers so thoroughly?
Just go! Yeah, I can't go anywhere. Go!
Lift him up.
We'll get you up. Come on. I can't go anywhere. One.
The injuries themselves present contradictions. Some victims had crushed ribs and skulls with a force medical examiners compared to a car crash, yet without the external wounds such trauma would typically cause. One young woman was missing her tongue and eyes. Traces of radiation were detected on some of their clothing. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation, ultimately concluding that an avalanche was the most likely cause. They suggested that the hikers cut their way out of the tent after feeling the snow shifting beneath them, and the subsequent injuries came from being tossed by snow or falling into the ravine in the dark. Yet this explanation fails to address many of the case's strangest elements. Why didn't experienced mountaineers recognize avalanche terrain? And why was their tent set up on a gentle slope well below the steeper terrain where avalanches typically form? How did some victims suffer catastrophic internal injuries without external trauma? Why did they wander in different directions rather than staying together? Lake Baikal's underwater anomalies. From the frozen mountains, our journey takes us southeast to the shores of Lake Baikal, the oldest, deepest, and most voluminous freshwater lake on Earth. Containing an astounding 20% of the world's unfrozen freshwater, Baikal stretches over 400 miles long and plunges to depths exceeding a mile beneath the surface. But Baikal's superlatives extend far beyond its physical dimensions. Beneath these crystal waters lies a world of anomalies that continue to challenge scientific understanding. In the late 1980s, Russian scientists using deep-water submersibles began documenting unusual circular patterns on the lake bed, perfect rings measuring up to 20 feet in diameter that seemed to be burned or imprinted into the sediment. These became known as Baikal circles, and despite decades of research, their origin remains unexplained. Even more puzzling was the 1982 discovery made by military divers conducting training exercises. At depths of over 1,600 feet, they reportedly encountered humanoid beings wearing silvery suits with spherical helmets.
Humanoid entities deep in the lake.
According to declassified reports, these creatures were over 10 feet tall and appeared to be engaged in some form of activity on the lake floor. When Soviet divers attempted to capture one of these entities in a net, the operation reportedly ended in tragedy. 3 divers died, while 4 others suffered serious decompression injuries. While skeptics dismiss these accounts as Cold War embellishments, they've gained credibility from multiple, consistent reports from military personnel who had no apparent reason to fabricate such stories. The Soviet military subsequently sealed portions of the lake for underwater weapons testing, though some researchers speculate this was a cover story to investigate whatever had been discovered. Adding to Baikal's mystery is its unique ecosystem. Scientists have identified over 3,000 to 700 plant and animal species in the lake, with an astonishing 80% found nowhere else on Earth. This includes the famous Baikal seal, the only freshwater seal in the world whose evolutionary path to this isolated inland lake remains unexplained. The water itself has unusual properties, extraordinarily high oxygen content, and peculiar patterns of internal waves and currents that don't follow standard hydrological models. In 2009, neutrino detectors placed on the lake floor began capturing signals suggesting the presence of unexplained energy sources deep beneath the lake bed. Russian geologists have since discovered significant deposits of gas hydrates, a frozen form of natural gas, but these don't fully account for the anomalous readings. The Tunguska event. Moving northward through Siberia, we encounter perhaps the most powerful, unexplained explosion in recorded history. On the morning of June 30th, 1908, something entered Earth's atmosphere and detonated over the sparsely populated eastern Siberian taiga near the Podkamennaya Tunguska River.
So Tunguska 1908 exploded 5 miles up in the atmosphere.
The blast flattened an estimated 80 million trees over 830 square miles, an area roughly the size of Tokyo, and generated a shockwave that circled the planet twice. The explosion released energy estimated at 10-15 megatons, about 1,000 times more powerful than the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Witnesses over 40 miles away reported being knocked off their feet by the blast wave. The air itself seemed to catch fire, the sky split in two and the forest burst into flames. For several nights afterward, the skies over Europe and Asia glowed so brightly that people could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. What makes the Tunguska event uniquely puzzling is what wasn't found. No crater, no significant fragments of an asteroid or comet, and initially, no radiation signature that might suggest a nuclear origin. The first scientific expedition didn't reach the remote site until 1927, nearly 2 decades later, led by Leonid Kulik. What they discovered was a surreal landscape, trees flattened radially outward from a central point, their trunks stripped of branches yet still standing at the epicenter, all pointing away from the blast. This pattern is consistent with an airburst explosion where an object detonates above the ground rather than impacting it. The leading scientific theory suggests that a small asteroid or comet fragment, perhaps 190 feet in diameter, exploded approximately 3 or 6 miles above the Earth's surface. But this explanation has never fully satisfied all the observed phenomena. Some indigenous Evenki people in the region reported seeing a god or shining dragon descend from the sky. Strange mutations in plants and accelerated growth patterns were documented in the decades following the explosion. Expeditions in the 1960s found minuscule metallic spheres in soil samples with isotopic ratios inconsistent with terrestrial materials. Later investigators discovered elevated levels of rare elements like iridium, cesium-135, and certain radioactive isotopes in the soil and tree resin, elements typically associated with cosmic bodies but in unusual proportions. Alternative theories have ranged from the impact of a small black hole to antimatter annihilation, from a massive natural gas eruption to the crash of an alien spacecraft. The Soviet nuclear physicist Alexei Zolotov even proposed that the Tunguska event represented an early experiment with directed energy weapons by inventor Nikola Tesla, who had been working on wireless energy transmission at the time. The mysterious Kola superdeep borehole. From astronomical mysteries, we turn to those beneath our feet. In 1970, Soviet scientists began an ambitious project to drill as deep as possible into the Earth's crust. Their creation, the Kola superdeep borehole, remains the deepest artificial point on Earth. A narrow 12-inch diameter hole extending 40,230 feet, 7.6 miles, into our planet near the Russian border with Norway. The Soviets undertook this massive engineering challenge to better understand the composition of the Earth's crust and potentially reach the Mohorovičić discontinuity, the boundary between the crust and the mantle. What they discovered during their 2 decades of drilling defied scientific predictions and revealed just how little we understood about what lies beneath our feet. One of the most startling findings came when the drill bit passed roughly 7.5 miles deep. Scientists had expected to find dry, solid rock at this depth. Instead, they encountered a layer of rock saturated with water, something thought impossible at such depths. Analysis revealed this wasn't ordinary water, but a hydrogen-oxygen compound formed through a completely different process than surface water, existing in a state neither fully liquid nor gas. Perhaps even more surprising were the biological discoveries. Microscopic plankton fossils were found at depths of 4 to 6 miles, remnants of ancient oceans from over 2 billion years ago that had somehow been preserved despite the crushing pressure and heat. More shocking still was the discovery of living bacteria thriving in rocks over 3 miles deep. These extremophile organisms, adapted to pressures and temperatures previously thought incompatible with life, have forced biologists to reconsider the very boundaries of where life can exist. The drilling operation also encountered unexplained phenomena that fueled darker speculation. Workers reported hearing what sounded like human screaming coming from the borehole, though scientists attributed these sounds to equipment noises distorted by the hole's acoustic properties. Temperature readings showed gradients far higher than predicted. At the bottom of the borehole, temperatures exceeded 350 degrees, 180 degrees Celsius, more than twice what geologists had expected. Perhaps most unnerving was the drill's final fate. In 1992, as the borehole approached its maximum depth, the drill bit encountered what workers described as an unusually void-like cavity. Shortly afterward, the drill began to spin erratically before coming to a complete stop, effectively ending the project. Official reports cited technical difficulties and the unexpectedly high temperatures, but rumors persisted that something at that depth had destroyed the equipment. Kolyma's Road of Bones. While the Kola borehole was a testament to Soviet scientific ambition, our next mystery reveals the darker side of Russia's history. Stretching over 1,200 miles through Russia's far east, the Kolyma Highway connects Yakutsk to Magadan on the Sea of Okhotsk. Local residents know it by another name, the Road of Bones, and for good reason. This desolate highway was constructed between 1932 and 1953 by prisoners of Stalin's gulags. The construction conditions were beyond brutal. Workers labored through winter temperatures that plunged to 70 degrees at 57 degrees Celsius, with summer bringing swarms of mosquitoes so dense they could suffocate animals left tied outside. Prisoners were given impossible daily quotas to fulfill, with rations reduced if they failed to meet them, creating a deadly cycle of malnutrition and weakening that claimed countless lives. The road earned its grim nickname from the estimated 250,000 to 1 million prisoners who perished during its construction. As the frozen ground made traditional burial impossible for much of the year, guards simply incorporated the bodies of the dead into the road itself. Corpses were laid down as a foundation layer before being covered with gravel and asphalt. In the most literal sense, the road was built on human remains. What makes this site particularly mysterious is the difficulty in determining the true death toll. Soviet authorities deliberately obscured records, and many prisoners were never officially documented. Some stretches of the road have revealed mass graves during thaws or erosion, but the full extent remains unknown. Modern, ground-penetrating radar studies have identified anomalies along the route consistent with mass burials, but comprehensive investigation has been limited. Local residents and travelers along the highway have reported unusual phenomena for decades. Drivers describe sudden cold spots even in summer, vehicle electronics failing without explanation, and seeing spectral figures along the roadside that vanish when approached. Indigenous Yakut shamans consider certain stretches of the highway spiritually dangerous, believing the unnatural deaths of so many have created areas where the boundary between worlds is thinned. Perhaps most disturbing are the personal artifacts occasionally unearthed by erosion or construction, worn shoes, eyeglasses, buttons, and other humble belongings that humanize the almost incomprehensible scale of suffering. Each item represents a person with hopes, memories, and a life stolen by one of history's most brutal regimes. The Siberian woolly mammoth remains from human tragedy. We turn to an enduring paleontological mystery that continues to yield remarkable discoveries. Siberia's permafrost has proven to be one of the world's most remarkable natural preservation systems, keeping extinct Ice Age creatures in a state of suspended animation for tens of thousands of years. Among these, none captures the imagination quite like the woolly mammoth, and nowhere on Earth has produced more complete specimens than the Siberian wilderness. The most extraordinary discovery came in 2013 when Siberian ivory hunters on the remote Lyakhovsky Islands encountered something unprecedented: the nearly intact body of a female woolly mammoth with liquid blood still present in her tissues. Named Buttercup by researchers, this specimen died approximately 43,000 years ago, but was preserved in such exceptional condition that her muscle tissue retained its original color and texture.
Perhaps more startling than the discovery of the blood is the fact that the find could potentially give scientists what they need to clone the extinct mammal.
What makes Siberian mammoth discoveries particularly revolutionary is their preservation quality. Unlike typical fossils where only bones remain, these specimens often retain soft tissues, organs, stomach contents, and even DNA. The famous Lyuba mammoth calf, discovered in 2007, still had her mother's milk in her stomach, giving scientists unprecedented insight into mammoth diet and physiology. This exceptional preservation has created a scientific gold rush, with researchers extracting viable DNA, intact proteins, and even living cells from specimens. The implications are staggering. Multiple international research teams are now working on de-extinction projects, attempting to resurrect the woolly mammoth through genetic engineering. By splicing mammoth genes into modern elephant DNA, scientists hope to create a hybrid creature that could potentially repopulate the Siberian tundra. The reasoning goes beyond scientific curiosity. Some researchers believe mammoth herds could help combat climate change by restoring the ancient mammoth steppe ecosystem. These massive creatures knocked down trees, promoting grassland growth that reflected sunlight and kept the permafrost frozen. Their return might potentially slow the thawing that threatens to release massive amounts of methane from the Siberian tundra. But these discoveries have raised troubling questions. Why did mammoths disappear so suddenly around 4,000 years ago when they had successfully survived previous warming periods? Some specimens show evidence of unusual diseases or genetic abnormalities, suggesting their population might have been in decline before human hunters arrived. Others contain unexpected concentrations of minerals or isotope patterns that don't match our understanding of their environment. Perhaps most mysterious is how these enormous creatures became so perfectly preserved. Some mammoth remains show evidence of flash freezing, a process requiring temperature drops far more rapid than any known natural phenomenon can produce. This has led some researchers to propose catastrophic climate events or even cosmic impacts that might have caused sudden temperature plunges across Siberia, Russia's ancient megalithic structures. While Siberia's permafrost preserves the biological past, another Russian mystery is etched in stone. Deep in southern Siberia's Gornaya Shoria mountains lies a structure that defies conventional archaeological understanding. First documented extensively in 2014, this remote site features enormous stone blocks, some weighing over 3,000 tons, fitted together with remarkable precision. Many of the blocks form wall-like structures with straight edges, right angles, and smooth faces that appear artificially shaped. What makes these structures particularly baffling is their size. For comparison, the largest stones used in the Great Pyramid of Giza weigh approximately 80 tons. The largest at Gornaya Shoria exceed 3,000 tons, raising profound questions about how prehistoric people could possibly have quarried, transported, and positioned such massive objects.
Gornaya Shoria megalithic wall, Siberia, Russia. The sheer size of this wall makes it seem like it was built by giants, and each stone of this wall weighs around 3,000 to 4,000 tons.
Modern engineering would struggle to accomplish such feats even with advanced technology. The precision of the stone fitting is equally puzzling. Many blocks joined together with gaps of less than a millimeter, a level of craftsmanship typically associated with much later civilizations. Yet the weathering patterns and integration with natural geological features suggest considerable age. While mainstream archaeologists have suggested these may be natural formations created by unusual fracturing patterns, others point to the geometric regularity and apparent tool marks as evidence of artificial construction. Gornaya Shoria isn't alone. Similar megalithic structures have been documented across Russia, from the Caucasus Mountains to the Urals. On the island of Vera in Lake Turgoyak, massive stone structures aligned with astronomical phenomena have been dated to approximately 6,000 years ago, making them older than Stonehenge. Near Mount Pidal in the Far East, enormous stone walls stretch along mountain ridges in areas with no recorded civilization capable of such construction. These sites share common characteristics that distinguish them from natural formations: geometric precision, extraordinary size, astronomical alignment, and locations that would serve no obvious practical purpose for early human settlements. Most are found in extremely remote areas that would have been difficult to access in prehistoric times, requiring significant organizational capability and motivation to construct. Russian archaeologists face unique challenges investigating these sites. Many are in nearly inaccessible wilderness areas with extreme weather conditions, limiting research to brief summer windows. Soviet-era archaeological orthodoxy discouraged investigation of potentially mystical sites that didn't fit established historical narratives. And the vast territory of Russia means many regions remain minimally surveyed, with new discoveries still occurring regularly. The radioactive village of Ozersk. From ancient mysteries, we move to more recent secrets hidden behind Soviet security cordons. In the southern Ural Mountains lies a city that didn't officially exist until 1994. Ozersk, known only as City 40 or by its postal code Chelyabinsk 65 during the Cold War, was one of Russia's most closely guarded secrets and the site of one of history's worst nuclear disasters. Built in the late 1940s to house workers for the Mayak nuclear facility, Ozersk was a closed city, a place unmarked on maps, surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers where residents needed special permission to enter or leave. The 100,000 residents lived in a strange parallel world, enjoying special privileges, higher wages, and better food supplies than ordinary Soviet citizens, but forbidden from telling even close relatives where they lived or what they did. What made Ozersk truly extraordinary was its purpose. The Mayak facility was the Soviet Union's first plutonium production plant for nuclear weapons. Workers at the plant, many unaware of the dangers, handled radioactive materials with minimal protection. In the facility's early years, nuclear waste was dumped directly into the nearby Teka River, which provided drinking water for downstream villages. The consequences became catastrophic on September 29, 1957, when a cooling system failure in a nuclear waste storage tank caused an explosion that released 20 million curies of radioactive material, twice the amount released at Chernobyl. This event, known as the Kishtim disaster, named after a nearby town to hide Ozersk's location, contaminated an area of 20,000 square kilometers inhabited by 270,000 people. What makes Ozersk particularly mysterious is how thoroughly the disaster was concealed. Soviet authorities evacuated some villages but told residents only that there had been an accident without mentioning radiation.
Over the years, nuclear waste has leaked many times into the environment. Along the banks of this river, the average radiation is 100 times the normal level.
Many evacuees were resettled in contaminated areas. Medical records of affected populations were falsified or classified. The disaster remained entirely unknown to the outside world until 1976, when Soviet émigré scientist Joris Medvedev revealed its existence, only to be dismissed as a fabricator by Western scientists who couldn't believe such a catastrophe could remain hidden. The human toll has been devastating. Cancer rates in the region remain elevated decades later. Genetic abnormalities have been documented in subsequent generations. Lake Karachay, where much of Mayak's waste was dumped, became so contaminated that standing on its shore for 1 hour would deliver a lethal radiation dose. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports from Ozersk residents who participated in cleanup efforts without protection. Many describe witnessing bizarre phenomena in heavily contaminated areas, unexplained lights, electronic equipment functioning erratically, and unusual animal behavior. These accounts mirror similar reports from Chernobyl's exclusion zone, suggesting extreme radiation may create environmental effects beyond our current scientific understanding. The mysterious Potomsky crater. Deep in the Siberian wilderness of the Irkutsk region lies one of Russia's most puzzling geological enigmas. The Potomsky crater, also called the Fire Eagle Nest by local Yakut people, is a massive conical structure rising from the forested landscape like an alien intrusion. Discovered in 1949 by geologist Vadim Kolpakov, this 40-meter-high cone with a diameter of 160 meters resembles a massive volcanic crater, but exists in a region with no volcanic activity. What makes the Potomsky crater particularly baffling is its composition. Rather than being formed from volcanic material, the structure consists of shattered limestone blocks that appear to have been ejected upward with tremendous force. At the center of the cone is a rounded dome surrounded by a ring-shaped trench, giving the entire formation the appearance of a giant nipple when viewed from above. Scientific expeditions have determined the crater is relatively young, between 100 and 500 years old, based on tree growth patterns in and around the structure. This recent formation rules out ancient meteorite impacts or volcanic activity, leaving researchers struggling to explain what could have created such a perfectly formed, massive structure in geologically recent times. The theories about Potomsky's origin range from the plausible to the fantastic. One scientific hypothesis suggests it might be a gas volcano.
This is coupled with a complete lack of any vegetation growth an odd habit of the crater shifting constantly, rising and falling according to the whims of some as yet misunderstood force.
A rare formation where pressurized natural gas explosively breaks through surface rocks. Others propose it could be the result of a steam explosion from groundwater superheated by an underground meteorite impact or intrusive magma that never reached the surface. More controversial explanations include a crashed UFO, an underground nuclear test, or even the impact site of a chunk of the Tunguska meteorite. Some researchers have noted unusual magnetic anomalies around the crater and vegetation patterns, suggesting radiation exposure. Trees near the crater grow faster but have mutations more frequently than those further away, adding to the mystery of the experiences of the scientists who've studied it. The leader of a 2005 expedition, Evgeny Vorobiev, died of a heart attack shortly after visiting the site, an event some locals attributed to a curse protecting the crater. Several researchers have reported equipment malfunctions, compasses spinning erratically, and unusual sensations of unease when near the formation's center. Geological sampling has revealed elevated levels of certain isotopes inconsistent with the surrounding landscape, but not definitively explainable by any single cause. Ground-penetrating radar suggests something dense may lie beneath the crater, though the difficult terrain has prevented extensive excavation. The indigenous Yakut people have long avoided the site, believing it to be where a powerful entity from the sky entered the earth. Their oral traditions describe the area as both sacred and dangerous, a place where the boundaries between worlds grow thin and where time itself behaves strangely. The Dakhnov skull. From geological anomalies, we turn to archaeological mysteries that challenge conventional understanding of human development. In 1975, construction workers near the village of Dakhnov in Russia's Rostov region made a startling discovery. While excavating a foundation, they unearthed human remains that immediately appeared unusual, most notably a remarkably elongated skull unlike any normal human cranium. When anthropologists examined the Dakhnov skull, they found it had a cranial capacity approximately 25% larger than modern human averages. The elongation wasn't consistent with any known form of artificial cranial deformation, a practice where some ancient cultures bound infants' heads to create elongated shapes. Instead, the skull appeared to have developed naturally in this extraordinary shape. What makes the Dakhnov skull particularly puzzling are its anatomical peculiarities. The bone structure is significantly thicker than normal human skulls. The eye sockets are larger and more rectangular than typical human orbits. Most remarkably, the skull lacks the normal sagittal suture, the fibrous joint that runs along the top of human skulls from front to back. In its place is a slight ridge, suggesting a fundamentally different cranial development process. Dating methods place the remains at approximately 5,000 years old, corresponding to the catacomb culture period in the region. However, the skull's features match no known population from this time period or location. Genetic material recovered from the remains yielded inconclusive results, with some sequences matching no known human haplogroups. Russian anthropologists initially classified the skull as an extreme case of congenital deformity, but this explanation fails to account for all its unusual features.
It's a lot about the changes that took place in human evolution. We're talking about deposits that we don't know exactly yet, but perhaps 100,000 years old.
The skull's owner appears to have lived a normal lifespan, with no signs of neurological impairment that would typically accompany severe cranial deformities. Moreover, subsequent excavations in the same region have uncovered similar, though less extreme, cranial formations, suggesting this wasn't an isolated anomaly but potentially part of a distinct population. The Dakhnov skull bears striking similarities to elongated skulls found in Peru's Paracas region, despite being separated by thousands of miles and with no known cultural connection between these ancient societies. This convergence has led some researchers to propose these individuals might represent a previously unrecognized human subspecies or the result of isolated genetic drift in certain populations. More controversial interpretations suggest the possibility of ancient genetic manipulation or even non-human origins. While mainstream anthropology dismisses such notions, the skull's features remain inadequately explained by conventional models of human development and migration. Adding to the mystery is the skull's subsequent history. After initial studies in the late 1970s, the original specimen reportedly disappeared from the Institute of Anthropology in Moscow, where it was being stored. Only photographs, measurements, and a plaster cast remain accessible to researchers. This disappearance has fueled speculation about suppression of evidence that might challenge established anthropological paradigms. The stone spheres of Champ Island. In the frigid waters of the Arctic Ocean lies Franz Josef Land, one of the world's northernmost and most isolated archipelagos. On Champ Island, within this remote territory, visitors encounter one of Russia's most perfect natural mysteries. Hundreds of stone spheres scattered across the landscape, ranging from tiny marble-sized balls to massive boulders over 2 meters in diameter. What makes these spheres so remarkable is their nearly perfect roundness. Many appear so precisely shaped that at first glance they seem artificial, as though giant stone cannonballs were abandoned by some ancient civilization. Their smooth surfaces and perfect geometrical form have led many who first encounter photographs to assume they must be man-made artifacts. Yet Champ Island lies in one of Earth's most inhospitable environments, with temperatures rarely rising above freezing and no evidence of permanent human habitation prior to the 20th century. The island remains ice-covered most of the year, accessible only during brief summer windows. How then did these perfectly formed spheres come to exist in such a remote location? Geologists explain the spheres as concretions, formations created when mineral cement binds particles of sediment together. Over millions of years, this mineralization happens equally in all directions around a central nucleus, often a fossil or mineral crystal, creating a near-perfect sphere. As the surrounding softer rock erodes away, these hardened spherical formations remain exposed on the surface. What makes the Champ Island spheres particularly unusual is their quantity, size range, and the perfect sphericity of many specimens. Some feature distinct layers like an onion when broken open, revealing their formation process. Others appear to be composed of materials inconsistent with the surrounding landscape geology, raising questions about their origins. The indigenous Nenets people who occasionally visited these northern islands incorporated the spheres into their spiritual traditions, believing them to be eggs of the giant birds their mythology described as creating the Arctic islands. Early Russian explorers who encountered the spheres in the late 19th century were equally puzzled, with some reports suggesting they recovered specimens with unnatural material compositions. In recent years, several of the largest and most perfect spheres have mysteriously disappeared from the island. While official explanations cite natural processes like coastal erosion or ice movement, some researchers have documented evidence suggesting human removal, raising concerns about preservation of this unique geological site.